Do you want to make awesome homebrew backgrounds for D&D 5th edition? Do you think that the versions in the player's handbook are boring? Well, today I'm going to be showing you how to make thematic and balanced backgrounds for 5e, and I'll also be giving away a new homebrew background, the Explorer. All that coming up. Greetings gamers, I'm Anto and I've been playing tabletop games for almost 20 years now. On this channel I'm all about helping you be a better dungeon master and build homebrew worlds. The background system is one of my favourite elements of D&D 5e. I think it adds so much to the story of a character and helps you get a real good sense of who this character was before they became an adventurer.
I just think they're neat.
But what if you can't find a background in the published material that fits what you have in mind for your character? Page 125 of the PHB has a very short section that covers it very briefly, but what it essentially recommends is combining two or more backgrounds. What I want to cover today is a much more complete approach that will let you build a background around a theme so you end up with something unique but also balanced. Before we start making our background, we need to understand what a background is mechanically. Backgrounds in 5e are broken into 8 categories, which are skill proficiencies, tool and language proficiencies, equipment, personality, ideals, bonds, flaws, and the feature. So if you're making a homebrew background, you want to come up with content for each of those categories. Now you might be thinking to yourself, why do I need to worry about making tables of personality traits? I already know everything about my character. Well, I firmly believe that when you're making homebrew content, you should strive to get as close as possible to the published format in that first draft. The reason for this is it forces you to consider balance for a start, which is super important, but it also helps you to learn how the official material is written and structured, and it gives you a better understanding of the material that you're familiar with. With backgrounds as an example, populating those personality trait tables might spark your imagination and take your character in a direction you were never expecting. Maybe you thought that your journalist background was going to be a hard-hitting reporter that would fit an inquisitive rogue build, but as you develop your tables, you come to realise you actually want a flamboyant presenter whose lusty nature is a far better fit with a bard. Trying to stick within the boundaries set by official material is also going to mean your homebrew is much less likely to be unbalanced and game breaking, which means you're more likely to be able to use it at a variety of tables. I have an entire playlist dedicated to building homebrew worlds, so if that's something that you're interested in, check that out after this video. So we know what individual elements make up our background, so let's start thinking about a concept for our homebrew background. We need a strong idea of what this background is conceptually, because that's really going to help us moving forward. For today's example, we're going to be making an explorer background, an Indiana Jones type who goes out into the world, raiding tombs and discovering hidden treasures, but is also still kind of handy in a dangerous situation. This is a great example background because we have a really clear image of who Indiana Jones is. I would suggest whenever you're making a background, try and pick an archetype of that background to use as a reference to guide you. So let's dive in and get to work on this explorer background. To start with, we're going to be focusing on proficiencies. Now, most backgrounds grant you proficiency with 2 skills, and then you get 2 secondary proficiencies. These are either extra languages or tool proficiencies. These other proficiencies are usually put into one category, so you'll either be proficient with 2 tools or have access to 2 languages, but there are some official backgrounds that mix and match, and even some that give you 3 of these secondary proficiencies, so you have a little bit of wiggle room to play around with things. Now we want to look at the list of skills and decide which ones make the most sense for our concept of the explorer. I think that history is a strong and obvious choice if we're going for that Indiana Jones vibe where we want a character who is knowledgeable about history and ancient tombs, etc. And then for our second skill proficiency, I'm going to go with perception, because the last thing we want is our explorer missing the obvious trap and triggering something terrible. Next, we need to decide on our secondary proficiencies. Looking through the list of available tools in the published materials, there aren't really any that stand out to me as being essential for an explorer. These tools could be useful for breaking into tombs and bypassing traps, but that doesn't fit super well with our core concept. We're not looking to make a grave robber here. We want someone that uses their brain to overcome problems rather than just forcing their way into things. We could always make a tool or a kit for our character as a homebrew, but as I said, in this first draft, we want to get as close as possible to the officially published content as we can. We can always go back later and add some other elements such as homebrew equipment for example. I think instead 2 languages makes more sense. The explorer is a travelled individual who's studied many cultures and been to many interesting places, so giving them a choice of 2 languages fits quite nicely with that. If you're looking to become a better dungeon master by building homebrew character options, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of my future videos. Next, we want to decide on what equipment to include as part of this background. Most of the official backgrounds include an outfit of some kind, a pack or a collection of items, and then something personal to that character, as well as some gold. For our explorer background, we'll give them a set of traveller's clothes. They'll be doing a lot of travelling between all these buried tombs after all. And then we'll give them an explorer's pack, which includes some of the essentials like torches, a tinderbox, and rope. And for the personal item, we'll give them a memento of their first discovery. The player can decide what this is, but it could be a coin from the first treasure they found, a totem of some sorts, or maybe even a piece of false treasure, a reminder that they're not always going to be successful. When it comes to gold, the average wealth of the backgrounds in the PHB is 12 GP, but most backgrounds either have 10 or 15 gold pieces as standard. So we're going to give our explorer 10 GP in a belt pouch. Certainly in a first draft of a homebrew, I want to go a little underpowered, if anything, rather than overpowered, because we can always dial it back up later on. But the main reason I'm going to go with 10 GP instead of 15 is I want to give our explorer another item, something that could result in a lot more gold in the future. I want to give our explorer a map tube containing a treasure map. Now this could be something that our explorer inherited that set them on their path, or it could be a recent acquisition, but it's something that can provide a lot of drama for our character, both in their background and in the progress they make in our campaign. Next, we come to the personality traits, ideals, bonds, and flaws. This is where you're going to get a real sense of who your character is as a person. A lot of newer players and DMs struggle with the concept of the personality traits and what kind of things go in each category, so let's really quickly run through them and give you a bit of an explanation. The personality traits are little snippets that tell you who this character is and who they believe themselves to be. I work alone doesn't give us anything about our character, but I work alone because other people will only slow me down says a lot more. They probably think that they're better than other people at this, that other people aren't as smart or as talented as they are. Thinking back to our example of Indiana Jones, when he goes to see Marion in Raiders, he doesn't want her to come with him, even though he's gone to her for help. In the very previous scene, we've seen that she's a strong and capable person, but Indy still thinks he's going to be better off alone. Ideals are what drive your character. They include your core beliefs and your life goals. Our explorer's ideal might be that they think only a life well travelled is a life well lived, or they want to uncover every secret the world has to offer. Bonds tie our character to the world and the people and places in it. Bonds could be an NPC who was fundamental to our character's development into this person, or it could be a specific event that changed the course of your life. And finally, flaws are your character's weakness, their fear. Flaws are details that someone could use to exploit you. If your character is deathly afraid of snakes, a villain could drop them into a pit of snakes, for example, and leave them to die. Now you want to think about at least one of each of these for your background, and ideally you want to make a table with several options for each. Doing this, like I said before, it's going to force you to consider things you might not have thought about otherwise. When you're making your suggested tables, you want to keep that core concept of the background, in our case the Indiana Jones style explorer who's got some book learning and is alright in a fight. You want to keep that in mind and use it as a reference point when populating the tables so that everything feels true to that core design element. I'd love to hear what personality traits you would give an explorer background though, so let me know down in the comments below. And that brings us to the background feature, which for me is the most interesting part of the background system in 5e. Here you have this nebulous narrative rule that you can work with your DM on to make the game much more interesting. Features tend not to have any mechanical benefits, so to speak. They don't give you any bonuses or affect your stats. Instead, they're things you can use for roleplay purposes to help in your adventures, and those things might ultimately lead to some mechanical benefit. When designing a feature for your homebrew background, you want to think about what the core story of the background is and use all the work you've already done to come up with something that complements this. In our case, we have an explorer who has proficiencies in history and they can speak multiple languages. They're well travelled and they've been to many places. So I think that a feature that would make sense for something like this is the I know a guy concept. Whether it's seeking refuge with the charismatic leader of the hidden city, or whether it's knowing a friend who can put you up for the night and also happens to run the best excavation crew in the region, no matter where your explorer is, they should always know someone or have heard of someone who can help them in the nearby area. To keep things relatively balanced, we'll probably want to limit the person our explorer knows to intellectuals who can provide information rather than warriors who could aid the players in combat. So our feature might look like this. Your travels have taken you far and wide and introduced you to many individuals with a wide variety of skills. No matter where in the world you are never more than a few days away from someone with the knowledge you need to further your goals. Using this feature, you know of a person within 5 days of travel who will be able to help you in your current endeavour. Work with your DM when using this feature to determine what your relationship to this contact is and whether it is a positive or negative relationship. This feature sows the seeds for some really great roleplay opportunities. And what I like about it is that as a player, it's not an immediate get out of jail free card for your problems. It gives a lot of leeway for the DM to place that NPC multiple days travel away from you, meaning there's a cost to getting that assistance. Or you might have a negative relationship with the contact, which provides more opportunities to roleplay. Perhaps your contact is a fellow explorer who once took a prize from right out under your nose and with whom you have a long-standing rivalry, but you don't know of anyone who knows as much about ancient dwarf runes than this person. And if you want to progress in your quest, you're going to need to swallow your pride and go and speak to this person. It's things like this that make me love the background system in 5e because they provide so many opportunities while also encouraging players to actually develop a history for their character. I've typed up a completed Explorer background as a full PDF, which you can pick up for free on my Patreon using the link in the description below. And I've also got a whole playlist on making homebrew worlds that has got a lot of great tips like this, so be sure to check that out as well. But until next time, happy gaming.